The latest edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside our NBA insider Bill Ryder, rocking his Barca gear again. I missed it. Did they win? What did they advance?
They won. They dominated. Lamine Yamal, who you know is a 17-year-old young star, had the greatest. I mean, one of the best goals I've seen in the Champions League. Watching
that, I saw
years.
On social media.
Oh my! I saw it live, and it was sort of a critical. Benfica just scored the momentum. That kid, man, it was great. It was a great game.
Congratulations to Barca. Be sure to check out all of our Champions League coverage on Paramount Plus. Later on in our show, Shaq is at it again. Wasn't great, Bill. The playoffs are approaching. There was a fun potential 4-5 matchup in the Eastern Conference last night between the Bucks and the Pacers. We'll talk about Tyrese Halliburton's wild and one to win that game. Do a little Eastern Conference questions. Who in the East could be a spoiler? Who's set up for the future? Who might need to blow it up? We'll do Team of the Night as well. But first, Kevin Durant's reported asking price, Bill. The Arizona Republic reporting that the price is 3 first-round picks and a young player. And I know that it's a topsy-turvy world, Bill, now in a post-Luka universe. This sounds reasonable to me, even at Kevin Durant in his mid-30s.
Yeah, I think maybe a little more, right, would be acceptable as an asking price. I mean, it's reasonable.
I felt like, given his age, probably, but yeah, I mean, if it was a little bit more, sure. But this is like, I looked at it and my head was to the
doable.
Side. I was like, I would do this. This is
a sign that a deal's getting done, right? I mean, I think they're not setting a price that no one can match. They're setting a price that several teams can match.
This is a reasonable asking price. And I had a couple of thoughts upon seeing it the first time around. My number one thought was, this is really going to piss off Mavs fans. Every trade in perpetuity is going to tick off Mavs fans forever, because Nico Harrison obviously gave away Luka for under market value. But then the other thought I had was, okay, so you're going to have some obvious teams that would be in the mix here. The Rockets, potentially the Mavs, maybe the Heat. They're always in the mix. The Wolves supposedly were sniffing around at the trade deadline. The one that I landed on that I thought was sort of a bummer here, because they traded 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, was the Knicks. Wouldn't he be great in the Garden?
Yeah. I mean, I think we sort of anticipated when that trade happened for New York that they really had jumped the gun, because Durant is available. I know we're going to hit this later, but there's still a sense out there that Giannis could be available. Let's wait and see what happens with him in the postseason. And I think that just goes to show and Luka, you brought up Luka. You literally never know who's going to come on the market. And so spending all your ammunition on the wrong guy, if he doesn't get you over the line, we celebrated that Knicks decision, but Leon Rose may have used his powder a little too soon.
If this is what's out there in the ether now, do we think that the Suns, do we feel like the Suns are already like really sniffing around, ready to move on? Maybe KD's ready to move on. It feels to me like, if they can get this, that, maybe KD has decided to get out of Arizona. But I wonder if there are like second thoughts or regrets from both Kevin Durant and the Suns that, hey, we probably should have done this at the deadline.
I mean, their second thoughts from Suns fans that Ishbia bought their team. I was thinking about this too. This is going to sound like a criticism of Kevin Durant, and I don't intend it to be, because we live in a world now where if you say anything true about a professional athlete or a politician, then you deserve to be lambasted in public. But Kevin Durant's a sensitive guy. I mean, that's not rocket science. That's not breaking news. He's a very sensitive person. He used to have the burner accounts, right? He's very comfortable sort of going at people who criticize him. Good for him. But my point is, you have to know who you're managing. You can't try to trade Kevin Durant without knowing that he's going to be okay with it and think that you're going to have any leverage or any ability to keep him. The minute that they were willing to send him to the Warriors, they hurt Kevin Durant's feelings or ego or what. The fact that he had to nix a trade means it's over. It's done. And producer Aaron makes a point. You made it too. Like producer Aaron wrote in our chat, if this is already leaking, are they going to get less? Probably, because this sounds like a sort of trial balloon. Here's what we're floating. Here's what we want. That's not how negotiations work. And to the point we're talking about now, Kevin Durant has some say over this, right? He can throw his weight around. Where is he willing to go? Where does he want to go? The way that the Suns have handled this and the toxic locker room that's been reported out there, I'm not sure Kevin Durant's going to feel inclined to make this really easy on Phoenix to allow them to drive the price up. There could be a bargain to be had for Kevin Durant this summer.
let's help Kevin Durant out. Where do we think he should go of those teams that I rattled off there? I love the Rockets fit. We talked
Me
about
too.
it for a while, and if they're only looking for a young player in return, man, the Rockets have young players in droves. Have your pick of the guys not named Amin Thompson. The Mavs, that situation is not great, and I'm not sure he would want to go there. Miami is still Miami, and we had discussed as well the Wolves with Ant it being like him being Ant's favorite player growing up. And wouldn't that be a fun pairing if you could figure out a way for that to work? I'm not sure how the salaries would match up. We'd really have to sit down and look at the cap there. But we're off the top of my head, I love the Rockets idea.
I think the Rockets make the most sense for everybody involved. The Rockets become a championship level team. And you and I talked about this. I thought it made sense to let it bake a little bit. And we're going to see what they do in the playoffs and where they're at. But it feels like, as anticipated, and they're still in the mix, but they've come back to earth a little bit. And they could use that level of a guy. And it makes sense for Kevin Durant. If he wants to be a Rocket, you can win an NBA championship with that team. I also think, like, as a young player, you're not going to get a future necessarily MVP or MVP level guy, but the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander addition in the Paul George trade is, I think, the model. You need to find a young player who you are absolutely sure can become Shai's the best case scenario, but a top line contributor, can be a top 2 or 3 player on a championship level team. And there aren't that many teams that have that. The Mavs don't have that to send. Do the Heat have that to send? I mean, I
don't think so.
I don't think so either. The Rockets have several guys that you could point to and you could say, yeah, that guy could certainly become an absolute star. So I think the Rockets make the most sense for everybody involved.
What's your mileage on Tari Eason?
So here's the thing. It's really easy to sit here and sort of speculate when it's not my job. It's a different thing to be Sam Presti and to somehow have known that. But yes, like,
I mean, I don't think Tari Eason is going to, nobody's going to become SGA. Yeah, you definitely want more. I think Tari Eason could, in an increased role, could be a very valuable player, but yes, he's not going to be SGA. All right. So you were talking about KD being a little sensitive when people say things about him. And I think that can be fair. It can also be true, though, that the NBA national TV chattering class has not acquitted itself well this season. We saw recently Charles Barkley giving hell to Kendrick Perkins over Kendrick Perkins just throwing wild stuff out there. And then that actually became an SNL weekend update skit this past weekend. And I don't think Charles was wrong here. Oh, it was very funny.
SNL this week.
Yeah. Kenan Thompson played Perk, and it was very funny, not surprisingly. But so I was like, okay, good for Charles. Charles is now, and in fairness, Charles says some outlandish stuff too. But I was watching that whole thing, and then last night on the Inside the NBA TNT B team, where you have Candace and Shaq and my guy Adam Lefko, shouts to Lefko from Philadelphia, they're discussing the Pistons, and Shaq not only stepped in it, Bill, but then doubled down and was glib about it. Here's what Shaq said last night. We got it. It's coming.
I think it's not coming.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get to it. I'll give you the revive. Okay. Now we got
what is coming.
Here's what Shaq said. All right, it's a live show. I can't believe he said all that, Bill. It's crazy. All right, now it's locked. Third time's the charm. Here's what Shaq said last night on Inside the NBA.
No, it locked up.
I will be interested. You said something very interesting about Cade Cunningham. Great player now at this stage. He plays at his own pace. Anybody that can consistently play at their own pace and put up numbers, it's a great player. I like the way he's playing. I like what Chauncey is doing. Those guys play hard. My favorite player on that team is Isaiah Stewart. Big body, hard guy. Like to knock people out, push people out.
No, I can't let this go. Like who? Who's doing it? You said Chauncey?
Chauncey's the coach, right?
Okay.
Portland. No. He coaches. JB
Bickerstaff. That's what I meant. Hey, you know, first of all, I don't watch Detroit. How about that, boo-boo? I don't watch him. So,
let that go.
I messed up. I made a mistake.
You put a trailblazer.
All right. So if it was a verbal lapse and he meant to say JB instead of Chauncey, you could maybe let that slide. But for him to double down, Bill, and say, I don't watch Detroit, boo-boo, when Detroit has been an awesome story. And by the way, Bill, this comes after him being on his podcast with Lefko and saying the exact same thing, that I don't watch the Pistons. And Lefko was indignant about it. He was like, listen, they're a really good team. And Shaq said, what are you talking about? They're 4 games under. And Lefko was like, no, they're 6 games over. And by the way, right now they're 8 games over. So this gives so much fuel to the fire of the people who say, oh, the NBA has a marketing problem. It's not fun. Nobody watches. Those of us who do watch, this is why players and coaches and fans who pay attention, and you and I go, no, the product is good. It's just that you've got guys with the stature of Shaq just not paying attention.
And part of the reason the Pistons are good is because Bill Laimbeer and Isaiah Thomas have really found their groove this year.
Joe Dumars is doing a bang-up job as the general manager.
God, Dumars is really crushing
Working
it, man.
both phones.
Working. So there's so much to unpack here. Here's the other thing that I think this might make you uncomfortable.
That clip, by the way, worth the wait. You know?
By the way, the clip is a lot more awkward to see than it was even to wait for. That's hard to watch Shaq. And then it's like, they're like, oh no, I gotta. Here's the thing. It also, look, we all love Inside the NBA. We're all supposed to say we love Inside the NBA. That's like the road answer and the required reality. But it's also true. But it has become a less good basketball show and a much better, just sort of entertaining thing. This is the premier show that covers the NBA. It is so important that even though TNT is losing its rights, it's going to be licensed to ESPN. There was this, oh my God, extinction level worry as if the white rhinoceros were going extinct. I mean, it was like, we have to save the show. And several of the people that are on it don't watch enough basketball. And that's not acceptable. I know that you're not supposed to criticize the show. He's not the only one that sometimes you're like, I don't know if you're actually watching this team.
Yeah. And so a couple of years ago when they rolled this out, when they decided to have a second Inside the NBA, I wrote about this for The Ringer, and I talked to Lefko and I talked to Shaq and I talked to Candace, and at the time D Wade was on it. And there's sort of a method to the madness of that show. Basically, when they show those highlights, the only people who have watched the highlights ahead of time are Lefko or Ernie Johnson. They're the only ones who actually know what's coming up. And they kind of like the organic, say whatever comes to your mind.
But you got to watch hoops, John.
Exactly.
I hear you. You gotta watch it.
That's what I was going to say, that it's okay to not have seen the highlights, but you have to know what's happening in the league. Especially you have to know that JB Bickerstaff, who is a potential coach of the year candidate, is the coach for the Detroit Pistons, who are having an excellent season, as opposed to Chauncey Billups, who's been in Portland for a minute now. And then to just be like, oh, I don't watch them, and just slough it off. This is why guys like JJ Redick earlier in the season, or Kevin Durant, or LeBron James get upset when people go, well, the NBA has a ratings problem and no, the game's not any good. They shoot too many threes. Well, no.
Well, here's the thing. And part of the reason that I'm that I'm sort of attuned to this being ridiculous is I worked on a show for several years when I worked at a different network that was at night. That was a highlight show. You had to be there late. You had to watch the games. And without calling out people, there were lots of NBA players and some great ones. Some were current players, a lot were former players. We'd all sit in the green room and they wouldn't watch the games. And I would go on and do TV with guys who didn't watch NBA games and didn't know who modern players were and had producers in their ear. So this is a thing that happens. It's just a thing. Like Shaq told on himself. I'm sorry. Shaq's amazing and everyone loves him. And you're not.
He's a legend.
This is supposed to be you're not allowed to make. The emperor has no clothes here. You don't watch the Pistons because they're about to win 9 games. All right, these guys are good and they could be the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. And JB Bickerstaff, who is the coach, has done this amazing. So it's just you don't have to watch 50 of their games, but you got to know who the coach is.
Well, on his podcast, Lefko crushed him for it. And he's like, we can only Shaq's whole point was basically, I only want to talk about the teams that have a chance to win. And Lefko was like, okay, so we can only talk about 3 teams in the league. There's 30 in the league, and there's a lot of good basketball being played. And there's so many fun narratives that go beyond, can they win a championship? And just absolutely destroyed Shaq on his own show. I encourage everybody to go check that out because it was good. Lefko's really smart. All right, let's take a quick break. I want to continue this conversation on the other side because there's a lot here, a lot of meat left on the bone that we can discuss about the NBA's marketing issues. And then we'll also get into the Bucks Pacers from last night and some of those other teams in the Eastern Conference that are potentially interesting that might not win a championship, but we're going to talk about anyway because we do watch basketball. This is Beyond the Arc.
The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship Selection Show on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. A reminder, you can get us wherever you get your favorite podcast. Please download, subscribe, leave a review, and then on Spotify, if you look below the play button in full screen mode, then you can find a little device there. You leave us a question or a comment on the show. Also on YouTube, producer Aaron put up a poll asking whether or not this topic that we're discussing, do you care that Shaq doesn't know who the coach of the Pistons is? Does that bother you, or is it worth the entertainment value? Which I guess comes back to the overriding point here, Bill, which is, as you were saying, like when Inside the NBA was going away, people, and I was one of them, lost their minds. I love that show. I love watching it. I don't go to it for NBA information. It is not an information show for me because you and I are bogged down in the information. I think the people we work with know a lot more about the league. I think that there are other places like the True Hoop Collective and the Ringer and, all kinds of different places where if you want to get into the NBA, there's plenty of people for you. And these guys are just like having a good time and they're legends. However, they did save the show and it is going to ESPN, and like ESPN is incorporating it. And now like, the ESPN model it also sort of embraces this like outlandish talk, whatever. You've got Stephen A and Perk, and they can say all kinds of stuff. But at some point, do you need to like go to them and be like, hey, we need you to tune in just a little bit?
Yeah, can you make a really interesting point? Because there is a wealth of great NBA content out there. And for those people watching, thanks for putting us on the list. But you don't have to win those people over if you're the NBA. If you are listening to this podcast or any of the things that you mentioned, you already know how good hoops is and you watch it. The real ambassadors to sort of growing the game, or the most important, are the post-game the NBA on TNT, and ESPN's game coverage, pre-post, halftime game coverage of games. And at the risk of sounding like a jerk and being honest, the ESPN show isn't good. It's not. You don't like to criticize colleagues. That's fine. I will. It's not very good. And most people that follow the hoops like you do, John, think it's not very good. It's not very good. And I don't even mind the like outlandish, like have an opinion is fine. Just have it be based on something. If ESPN was out there saying all the true things that everybody talks about when they gossip with agents and executives and scouts, and nobody wants to write because it's going to piss off Kevin Durant, great. But that's not what ESPN is doing. That's not right. That's not. So like you have the two main things. One of them's amazingly entertaining, but some of the principal people don't watch enough hoops. And I think you might be able to put Barkley on that list. I love Chuck.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. And the other is ESPN, where I don't know if they watch hoops because it's so bad. It's hard for me to consume the content sometimes. So like if I'm the NBA, I need my TV partners. I'll be really curious what Amazon and NBC do to have. There should be better show. There should just be better shows that to the casual NBA fan make you want to watch basketball.
Well, my suspicion, and this is just, you hear little things in the ether. There are certain people who are available and out there right now. Zach Lowe is one of them. I would anticipate that he gets attached to one of these places. And like, that's the thing. Zach is incredibly smart and I love listening to him. Bob Myers, super smart. Windy, really smart, right? There are people who are included who aren't just.
Is Bob Myers that good on TV though?
I think he's not bad. I like Bob Myers.
I mean, he's very smart. Look, okay. So again, I don't know how good of a GM he is, and I don't think you do either, because there's a Steph effect. I mean, that guy could go to Philly or wherever. All right, I think Bob's fine on TV. I think Bob clearly wants a job, so I'm not sure how like critical Bob's going to be out there.
All right, so a guy like Bobby Marks, who wasn't a very successful general manager, I think is awesome in the role that they have him in ESPN, because you get so much information about contracts and cap space and moving pieces around. Like the informational, there are people out there. My point is that there are people out there who are
Wendy is
smart
amazing
and know the league and are on TV. That's just like they're not out there as much as I would otherwise like.
full disclosure, I went to Brian's wedding, so I'm a bias. I'm a buddy.
Yeah.
I think Wendy could front is the wrong word, but I think he could be the information focal point on any of those other shows. And not only that, he can break news, but he is willing sometimes, I think, to say things that people are talking about that you don't hear anywhere else, which has a lot. I'm with you on Brian, but he's not. Look, he's on some of their coverage, but he's not on that. He's not like hanging out with Malik after the game.
Exactly. They have shows where they utilize the people that you and I look at and go, oh, they know what they're talking about. They're fun and they pay attention. And then there are the halftime shows and the post-game shows that tend to be more personality-based. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about actual basketball. Last night, a game that probably wouldn't have been on Shaq's radar. The Bucks and
this was amazing.
The Pacers have been on your radar for a while. You've been calling this. It looked like the Bucks were going to pull off this game. Those two teams, along with the Detroit Pistons, who we'll get to in a second, have been jockeying for that 4 or 5 slot. And it's going to be really interesting to see what seeds they end up with. But it looked like the Bucks had that game until the end of the game, Bill, when Tyrese Halliburton hit a game-winning 3 and 1. They were down They were down 3. And he hit the 3 and the N1 with 3.4 seconds left to win the game by 1. Incredible shot by Halliburton, no doubt about it. Isaac Pruitt filmed that thing over and over again.
Did you?
Are we sure it was a foul on Giannis?
The angle that I saw, and I watched it in real time, and then I watched it a couple. I don't know.
It looked like he might have brushed him a little bit. I don't know. That's a tough foul call to give there.
I've seen the angle that's basically right Giannis's back, and you're sort of watching Halliburton from the left. I need a side angle that I haven't seen, and I didn't seek out. Maybe it's out there.
I saw multiple angles on it, and so after the review, they called that Giannis was in the landing zone, which I guess. But again, I was looking for that too, and I'm not entirely sold on this. I just think it was a really tough call to give. But they end up winning that game. If they end up in the 4-5 matchup there, and we need to get into the Pistons too, because the Pistons are in line for this as well. But let's just say it is the Bucks and the Pacers. You've been on the Pacers the entire time. The Bucks have been playing better basketball though since the trade deadline. Who would we like here?
I mean, the favorites obviously could be Milwaukee.
Yeah, it's tough.
I mean, I'll take the Pacers and not feel great about it. Here's what I will say: this idea, and I've heard it from a lot of people in Milwaukee. I'm on the radio in Milwaukee. So this idea that we'll beat the Pacers, like that's it'll be hard, but it's a give me is wrong. The Pacers are playing. So I know I keep throwing this stat out there, and this has faded a little bit, but going back to mid-December, I think December 13th, where they got on this roll, or just January 1st, if you want to just do the start of this year, they're a top 10 offense. And they're nearly or at, depends where you look in the timeline, a top 10 defense. So they've vastly improved defensively. They've been playing much better basketball. I've already said all this stuff. They made a run last year to the conference finals. And most importantly, Halliburton's playing really well and playing with like some swagger and some confidence. And we saw it last night in that shot. Yeah, they're good, man. They're not going to beat Cleveland or Boston, barring something catastrophic, but they're a tough out. They're a tough out with every other team at that level.
Indiana is exactly what Indiana should be. A team in that market that is just like every year you're fighting you're in the playoffs and like you're going to be a tough out and you're competent and you've got some good pieces and you're not going to roll over for anybody. Them going to the Eastern Conference Finals last year was the high watermark for them. That's a great season. It's okay to be a team like that. Here's
my hot take, and I hate that term, but I'm going to give it to you. They're the new Miami Heat. They're what the Heat were for 6 or 7 years. They're going to overachieve. They're incredibly well coached. They're going to make the most of whatever talent they have. They're not in as desirable a market, but the Heat have faded post Jimmy, and
Indianapolis is the Miami of Indiana.
It is. By the way,
everybody says that.
It's a great sports venue. It's a great place to go for a week and cover a big event. They do everything right. Their ceiling's not as high as most other teams, but they're going to get close to that ceiling every year now.
You're high on the Pacers. You want to know who's high on the Bucks?
Who?
Kyle Kuzma. Now, I'm bringing this to your attention because I don't know if you know about this, and I don't know if the listeners know about this, but I have a little treat for you, Bill. Kyle Kuzma, are you aware that he writes a newsletter called Kuz Control, where control is spelled with a K? This is actually true. So When I found out about this, I immediately subscribed to this newsletter. And in the latest edition of the Cruise Control newsletter, he explains that since the trade deadline, that the Bucks are one of the best defensive teams since the trade deadline. And I went back and I was like, is this right? And I went back and looked. They do have, going into last night, the 6th best defensive rating since the trade deadline. Something else that I learned in his newsletter, with the amount of shooting we have, we're a real threat. And I said, let me just go check the numbers on this. Again, since the trade deadline, 8th best true shooting percentage. This is the kind of thing you can get from Cruise Control. And I want to show it to you, Bill, because it's worth seeing what you get when you subscribe to the Cruise Control newsletter. Producer Aaron, throw that up there. This is what you get, Bill. In the Cruise Control newsletter. It's really fantastic. I highly recommend. You get like these glamour shots of him along with like little nuggets about what's going on in his life. He says, Bill, and this is my question for you that I got from the Cruise Control newsletter. He says, even though they lost last night, again, it came out before the game. He said the momentum is real and we're locked in. Are you buying that from Cruise Control newsletter author Kyle Kuzma?
2 thoughts. First, I need someone to Photoshop my face onto Kuz there to see if I can pull off the look with the rings and the sweater and the stuff. So I may have pulled a Shaquille O'Neal here. I may have pulled a Shaq. Okay. So if I did, I need you to just, it's okay.
I'll reel you in.
We're partners. Did the Cruise Control newsletter
with a K
point out with a K?
Yeah.
Is there a new head coach there, or is Doc Rivers still the coach?
Yeah, he didn't get into that. Still Doc.
If Doc, okay, I'm out. On the Bucks.
Yeah.
I'm out of the. I mean, congratulations on the stats.
I don't blame you for being out on the Bucks. I need you to be in on the Cruise Control newsletter. For those of you listening on the podcast, I recommend that either you check out what we just put up on the YouTube page or just go directly to the source, because man, is it worth it. All right, we're going to take a little break, and then on the other side, we'll continue with some Eastern Conference conversations, teams that could potentially be spoilers, who set up for the future, who needs to blow it up. We have to talk to the Pistons. Pistons are having an awesome season. We'll do that next. This is Beyond the Arc.
Sail GP lands in California. The Port of LA welcomes the 12 world-class teams to the epicenter of glitz, glamour, and Hollywood.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. You can find us on YouTube at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and hit the bell symbol. You'll get notified when we go live. All right, Eastern Conference mid-tier conversation here, Bill. The Pistons are right there with the Pacers and the Bucks in that 4-5-6 grouping. They've won 7 of their last 10. They've been outstanding because of the injuries and the 65-game threshold. Cade Cunningham could very well end up all NBA. This feels like a team that's set up to spoil somebody's playoff run here, maybe win a first-round series depending on who they get grouped in with, and be a tough out.
Can you imagine? By the way, I'm coming around to this idea, at least now, of Cade Cunningham being 5th on my MVP ballot.
Wow, you go that high, first team.
I mean, I'm certainly open to the idea. I if they finish 4th after what they did, because right now they basically are tiebreakered into the 6th spot rather than the 4th or the 5th, but they could easily be the 4, right? Just sort of depending how they and the Bucks and the Pacers do down the stretch. Yeah. I think all NBA first team is possible. And I haven't looked at all NBA teams, but the second team feels like a lock. Just talking to you about it, just sort of. I mean, lock is strong. But
yeah, that's what I'm. So I mean, you're much higher on him, and I'm super high on him. But my question was going to be, and I already know the answer to this because I asked Sam Quinn last week, but I was going to ask you, are we feeling like, he's a lock for all NBA, and that lock being, third team or second team. But if you're talking potential MVP candidate, then that he certainly would be. Here's the question I also posed to Sam, and I wanted to take your temperature on it. Are we at a spot? Because I look at Cade and I almost see like bigger SGA. Are we at a spot now where, in terms of American talent, that Cade is about to, or maybe already has, leapfrogged Ant?
So on performance this year, yes, maybe. But I think on ceiling, I still think Anthony Edwards is capable of being a top 3 or 4 player sort of consistently. And that gets a little bit easier too if if Joel Embiid's washed, right? Like if you sort of take him off the perennial list. And so, no, I still think I'd rather have Anthony Edwards for the next 10 years than Cade Cunningham.
It's tough for me. I really love Cade because, again, I mean, like Ant, he's a bigger body, and I just love the way that he plays the game. And this season, especially with Ivy being out, like, you've had a really good run from him. And as you mentioned, he's buoying a team that nobody had. I mean, last year they won 14 games, Bill.
I know.
I mean, they're having an incredible year. What if they get the Bucks in the first round and they end up sending the Bucks home?
What if, I don't think this will happen. I think if they play the Bucks, they can beat them. I'll fade any Doc Rivers team. I just will. What if they get the Knicks and they beat them? I mean, can you imagine the gnashing of teeth and the just hellscape that'll be Knicks to them? And I don't think that would happen. And I think we'd all take New York.
Yeah.
But what if the Knicks start to run out of steam and sort of those injuries start to pile up a little bit? And the Knicks are supposed to be championship contenders. The Bridges trade, bringing in Cat, what they've given up, all the moves they've made. That's a different thing than a young Pistons team where it's all gravy and I can't believe we're here. And right, there's a looseness because whatever you
there's
do,
no expectations.
There's none. You're building to something.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would be a fun series.
Great series. And the Pistons are really and have been consistently really good defensively this year. I'm not saying they're going to shut down the Knicks, but they're a top 10 defense. And they've gotten Cade Cunningham, a guy that I think, to your point about how much you like Cunningham, if Brunson's a little banged up, and obviously we'll sort of see how his ankle is, and whatever Cat's sort of current form, I think Cade Cunningham, and this to me is important in a series, I think he can be the best player on the floor in a Pistons-Knicks series 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times. And if that's true and the defense locks in, something crazy could happen.
Something crazy could happen. That's why I had them on my potential spoilers list. As we're looking forward here, because the Pistons are really set up pretty well for the future, right? I mean, they've got Cade and Ivy and a bunch of flexibility, and they have an idea of what they want to be moving forward, and they had that cap flexibility. Are there any other teams in the Eastern Conference? I went through this and I was like, okay, the Bucks are probably closer to the Bucks are closer to the end of Giannis being around, I think, than just sticking around. The Pacers are what the Pacers are forever, and that's okay. They're competent and good and professional. The Pistons are a forward-looking team. I don't know what the Hawks are. I don't know what the Heat are going to be. Forget about the Bulls. Are you buying maybe like the Magic just because they have 2 really good pieces?
Yeah. So we're talking like who are the teams that maybe have set themselves up clearly for a future that can be better than it is now?
Yeah.
There's not many. That's a really good question.
There's not many.
I think the Pacers are what they are, and I think they're going to perform at the highest level of their sort of reasonable expectation, but they're not winning an NBA championship with a Siakam-Halliburton duo.
What about the Raptors?
So the Raptors are really interesting because they've been really good. I mean, they've been like sort of too good. They've been interesting.
Well, they're trying to lose games at the end by taking their best players off the floor.
And those guys are like, they have an interesting core. If they draft, if what's his name at Duke, Cooper Flagg is the guy, and they draft him, or they get somebody else who's the guy. Yeah, but that's like 2 or best case scenario. That's 2 or 3 years from now, and they're missing whatever piece they need. They have to draft the right guy.
I mean, so Masai obviously thinks that next year they can be Eastern Conference relevant because you've got Scotty Barnes and RJ and IQ.
I think that's reasonable.
And
6 or 7.
Grady Dick and Sheed and whoever you end up taking in the draft. So like they could be potentially, in that 4, 5,
Brandon
6.
Ingram. That's right.
Yeah, Brandon Ingram. I mean, like that's a team that could potentially be
5, 6.
right?
I mean, look, if you draft a superstar in the draft, if you draft someone who's an absolute game changer, and you have that roster already, I mean, you're not going to be. Also, if the Bucks blow it up, and who knows, or if they just come back and they're not very good, the Bucks could come down. The Heat aren't very good. I mean, Atlanta's not making a big jump. Chicago's a damn mess. So there's also room for someone to sort of step up in the East. Maybe.
So those teams that you just rattled off, I also wanted to discuss like who needs to blow it up. Obviously, the Bulls, top of that list. We've been calling for that for years. I don't know that they'll ever. Yeah, the whole organization needs to
get
go
rid of their
away.
owner.
Yeah. I mean, you would never expect the Heat to do it because the Heat just figure that they're the Heat and they can rebuild on the fly, and maybe they get Kevin Durant and then they're off and running again. But if they don't end up with somebody like Kevin Durant and a superstar this offseason, like at what point do you look around and go, I really like Bam and Tyler Hero's having a great season, but like, is that enough for us to be good?
I think it goes deeper, higher on the food chain. Do you ever have a buddy on like a show, or I have a radio show? And I had George Sedano on my radio show yesterday, and I've known George forever, and he's a friend of mine. And I asked him a question that I knew was going to elicit a put out response because that's just me. But George does radio here in LA where you and I are, and he's super talented, ESPN sideline guy, really, really good. But he comes from Miami. He did radio in Miami for years. He's a Miami guy. And I said, hey, is it time for Pat Riley to just step aside? And he was so offended. And he was so put out. And I did George did it on purpose. I think that's actually the bigger issue. And George made a point that it was a smart one. I think is still wrong. And that is that they've sort of diversified. That basically Riles has shared power and seated. They've promoted several years ago Andy Ellsberg to being the actual GM. They've got other
awesome.
Who's great.
He's
I know Andy really well.
Dude.
Yeah, he's so good at the camp that the league consults him. Spoelstra could be a Brad Stevens eventually. He could move into a front office, and he has a lot of power. I don't think it matters. I think that, look, the Jimmy Butler thing is a Pat Riley production. It just is. And so all the things you're talking about, do you blow it up? Do you move on from Bam? And they found some talent in the draft. I think the deeper question is, does the Heat way work? And that's a way of saying, is Pat Riley still the guy? And I think maybe he's not, John. And I think maybe for Miami to reset, they need an actual reset. And that includes this legend who's not going to be forced. He's going to have to leave on his own accord.
And I don't hate that idea. I mean, don't forget earlier in the season when Dan Lebitard had Riley on the show and he asked him, hey, like, this whole thing is going on and it's asking people are starting to ask, are you washed? He put it, more diplomatically than that, but that was basically, he used the phrase, are you washed? And Riley said, maybe I am.
Maybe,
so like at some point for him to like, just think about, hey, maybe I am. Cause I do think the whole Heat culture thing would preclude them from, it's not in their operating procedure to just blow the whole thing up. I do think, however, that they've been setting this thing up for quite some time for Spoelstra to pull the Brad Stevens and move to the front office, and they identify a new coach. And then Andy, as you said, is just so brilliant with the cap that like you do have a really good, organizing principle there. But something needs to change, and you need to identify some other stars that you can get. Even if it was Kevin Durant, how many years can you squeeze out of him?
Brad Stevens was hired by Danny Ainge when people thought that was stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a coach of the year call me unsolicited when Stevens got hired, unsolicited, which doesn't happen, to tell me how nice a guy Brad was and how he was going to fail because you can't make that leap, especially from.
People were convinced he was going back to college sooner than later.
Right. So that's a Danny Ainge, right? Like just like Riles to Spo was Ainge to Stevens. But when Stevens got elevated, he did it his own way. I mean, who the coach is now, the sort of style of play, some of the moves that they've made. My point is that Spoelstra making a leap isn't just going to be like, you're right, it won't be Riles 2.0. You have this framework, you have this culture in place, you have interesting things. And the other thing about the Heat that I think has failed Pat Riley, and in fairness, Mark Cuban made the same mistake and got bailed out when Atlanta didn't know what Luka Doncic was and they got Doncic in the draft. But like the Mavs, when they blew up their championship team in 2011, the Heat have always just assumed we're going to go into free agency and people are going to come here. Giannis is going to come here. Lillard, we'll get Lillard. If Kevin Durant's available, we'll get him. And the fact is that just hasn't been true. I mean, Jimmy Butler was basically coming off 2 or 3 toxic relationships and didn't have a dance partner, or at least enough of them. And so I also think that their approach, while admirable, and their culture, while impressive, has relied on some hubris, like Cuban showed, where they thought people were going to come to them, and it just doesn't work like that. You have to sell guys now. You have to give them a reason they want to be there. Yeah,
beyond the fact that South Beach is pretty great, like, and the weather's nice, and there's no state income tax.
But these guys can live wherever they want.
Yeah, exactly.
You get to be there for the season. You're right.
You're going to be rich regardless. Last thing in the Eastern Conference that I wanted to run past you was just how I'm going to anticipate that I am much more clued into this than you are, just because this is like in my DNA. It's in my core. But the tank wars in the Eastern Conference have been heating up, and I love the tank wars. And tonight, man, do we get a special one. I can't wait to see the teams that they roll out there, but you get Sixers versus Raptors tonight. The Sixers are a half game up on both the Nets and the Raptors for the 5th worst record in the NBA. This is critical for the Sixers, again, because if they finish 6th, then they only have a 46% chance at keeping the pick, which is top 1 to 6 protected to Oklahoma City. If they finish 5th, that increases to a 64% chance, and they desperately need something to go right. I've been saying for a while now that they're going to miss the playoffs, and the pick is going to get shipped to Oklahoma City, and it's going to put like a cherry on the awful Sunday that has been this season. However, this whole thing, this is one of the more interesting storylines to me as we, funnel into the postseason and the regular season wanes.
You are our tanking aficionado, and I mean that in the Hemingway original passion. You have the passion for it. It's in your blood. So let me ask you this. I mean, a few years ago, the NBA adjusted the odds here where it's right. It's more spread out. Right. Yeah. You
specifically because of Sam Hinkie. Yeah.
I understand that when it's over, and you're trying to increase the percentage chances even in the margins, but it's a lot more marginal than it used to be. Doesn't it sometimes, you're the aficionado, you tell me, doesn't it feel like much ado about nothing sometimes? Because the numbers move, but they don't move as significantly as they used to.
Yeah. I mean, for the top or for the bottom 4, right? Whoever ends up, because the 2 teams that finish with the worst record will get the same percentage. And then, the lottery will affect the 3 and 4 slot. For the Sixers, though, for their situation, it is critical because, again, you go from basically less than a coin flip chance to keep your pick to roughly 2 and 3 chance that you get to keep your pick in a year where nothing has gone.
Matter what the numbers say, they're not going to have that pick.
No, although Sam, did I tell you Sam wrote a piece for CBS Sports basically saying that the Sixers were the luckiest team in lottery history or some garbage like that. And I was like, Sam, when you're talking about that, you neglect to point out that with those lottery picks, that one of them was Ben Simmons, who immediately forgot how to shoot and has hit 5 threes in his entire NBA career. And the other time they made a deal with dealer Danny Ainge, and dealer Danny ended up taking Jason Tatum to move back, and they traded up and they took Markelle Fultz, whose shoulder fell off. So
who also forgot how to shoot.
Make that in. Yeah, and also forgot how to shoot.
Yeah. But look, Sam's not wrong. He's just wrong, right? I mean,
he's
the
looking
numbers
at the
numbers
passionately. Yeah.
Right.
But anyway, as Aaron points out, and I totally believe this, not only is the pick going to ship, but Sam Presti will find somebody at 7 who's like a perennial all-star, and Sixers fans will just watch that guy succeed on multiple championship teams next to SGA forever. All right, let's wrap it up with team of the night.
I mean, mine's easy. It's Cleveland. I mean,
15 in a row
for the second time this year.
15 in a row. I mean, they've been
15 wins in the same season.
Yeah. I was going to go with either them or this other team. So I'll go with this other team. I'll take the Pacers because of what they did last night when they're down 3 with 3.4 seconds left. Your Pacers, Halliburton hits the game winning 3 and 1. Although again, not sure it was a foul on Giannis, but still they won that game and it was a fun game down the stretch. So congrats to the Pacers and the Cavs on that one. All right. We're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to be live on CBS Sports Network at 1 p.m. Eastern. Come and join us on that. There's only about a month to go in the season. So tomorrow we're going to do our awards 1 month out from the regular season being over and the postseason being back. Bill and I will give our NBA awards for MVP and Rookie of the Year. Somebody's going to have to win that thing, and DPOY, and we'll go through the whole thing. So come and join us on CBS Sports Network tomorrow. All right. But for now, for our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, I am John Gonzalez. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.